And thank you to JLF for not only bringing all of you together, but to discuss an issue or a thought that actually we don't think about. If I was to go around this audience and ask, how many have heard of the Tatas? I mean, is there anyone who hasn't put up their hands? Please let me know. It's like it's something that you just, you grow up with. Every bus has the word Tata emblazoned on the back of it. We say, okay, Tata, but we're not quite sure whether we're speaking about the brand or we're speaking, we're just saying goodbye. But there are three words that are emblazoned on the crest of the Bombay house. Humata, Hukta, Huvarshata. Persian and used by Parsis, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, which essentially are the beginnings of this company. It's hard in a world where we're also cynical to think about, the idea of businesses as essentially good things or philanthropic things. Today, the word corporate doesn't actually necessarily always have a good ring to it. The book we're discussing today, you have it here before you, Jamsetji Tata, and it talks really, there are two disclaimers, by the way, in the first pages itself. The first disclaimer is this is not a biography. This is not a biography of Jamsetji Nasarwanji Tata, who founded Tata Sons in 1868. This is this is actually about the essence of Jamsetji Tata. It's about how the Tata culture actually was able to grow. The second is that this is a book, and this makes it, I think, unique, is a book dedicated not to any one person or to a country. It's dedicated to a building, and that is Bombay House. So I want to begin by asking you the question that I think everybody in the audience wants to ask, and has been raging across television debates for the last few weeks. How many hours do you work in a week?
Good question, Suhasini, to start that discussion. There are weeks in which I have worked more than 90 hours, and there are weeks in which I have worked far less than 70 hours. So I don't really believe in the number of hours we work. I just believe in what work we do within whatever number of hours we work. I just want to mention something. Suhasini referred to OK Tata. How many of you have seen OK Tata on trucks all across? There's some interesting stories behind that. If she gives us some time at the end, I'll reveal those.
Sure, we'll definitely come
Mr.
back.
Gopalakrishnan, how many hours do you work for?
Or did you when you were?
I work as many hours as I enjoy it. So I don't know the number of hours.
All right. The reason I asked this question is a slightly more serious one. And here comes the third disclaimer. For the first 5 or 6 years of my married life, I was a Tata Bahu, if you like. My husband worked for the Tata. So I was quite aware of the culture inside the Tatas, the kind of importance that was given, in a sense, to work-life balance and to the importance of families of those who were employed at the Tatas. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, what really differentiates the work culture of the Tatas from other places?
I think the one single distinguishing point about Tatas, which I found remarkable, please remember I joined Tatas when I was already 52.
You moved, yeah.
So I wasn't like Harish, green from college.
25.
Huh?
I joined at 25.
Yeah, so you're much more impressionable at that age. I came at a cynical age when you think kaun si badi baat hai. So what really struck me about Tata is that every person thinks he's working for the society.
Society.
And that I found incredible. He may be an accountant, he may be a power engineer in the hydroelectric power station, he may be a software coder, but scratch him a little and he says, Samaj ke liye kaam kare. Now, there is really no reason why in a lit fest you should be talking about Tatas. But I do think there is something much wider. And therefore, I'm glad you asked the question. This is what I found. And that's what caused me to be intrigued. Over the period of 18 years that I served on the Tata board, I said, what is there about this? It's got a lot of frailties, it's got a lot of weaknesses, it's got a lot of strengths. But what is there about this that it has managed to create this if I may use the word aura. Not in a Amitabh Bachchan sense, but real, it's touching. Remember, there are 1 million employees of Tata today. There are at least 3 million who are alive, retired, whatever. If you multiply 4 million and add another 3-4 million as vendors and multiply that by 4, you get 30-35 million. That's half the size of Britain. The Tata family is 35 million people who depend for their existence on Tata. So really Tata has not much of a choice but to continue to being Tata. And that I'm very proud of.
Well, I mean, all you say really resonates with the audience, but I want to get deeper into what you called the shortcomings as well as the great service that the company has done. To start with, why did you write the book? There are so many biographies out there. I think in the book you write about the idea that one of the inspirations was talking about the relevance of Mahatma Gandhi. What were the other reasons for wanting to write?
Well, I thought of writing the book quite late, just before I retired. And the trigger was, firstly, I was getting this thing going around in my head. What's so great about Tata? Why can't I put my finger on it? The second thing that happened was Ram Guha happened to come and address some conference. And he made a statement. Ram Guha makes his statements very emphatically.
Yes.
And so it's nice to listen to him. And he said, if you have to count 4 greatest Indians of the 19th century, he would count Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, and Jamsetji Tata. Then he went on to say whatever else he was saying. And I said, Ram, are you serious that he's one of the greatest Indians? He said, listen, there are many, many definitions of great Indians. But that was a point of curiosity in my mind. I won't go into my conversation with Ram Guha. If somebody thinks of him, a historian of some consequence, as one of the greatest Indians, kuch to hoga. So that was the second sort of reason. The third was I was idle. I had retired. And I said, why not keep myself working and do something? And then I rang up Harish and he'll tell you the story of my ringing him up. And we decided to collaborate on this.
Yes, please tell us your excuse for writing the book.
Yeah, so let me tell you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan is 15 years my senior in the Tata Group. Okay, I was a young manager in the group in Titan. At the time, he was already the director of Tata Sons, our holding company. And sometime in the year 2012, I decided to take a sabbatical to write a book about the Tata Group. I had never written a book before. I was not even sure if someone was going to publish it. So I wrote an email to Mr. Gopalakrishnan saying, can I come and meet you to discuss a book I want to write? I thought the email would go where most emails go, into cyberspace without a response. Because he was a busy person. He was on the boards of several companies. In 2 days, I get a response from him, Harish, come across to Bombay House, the headquarters of the group. Meet me and I'll discuss the book with you. I go there. He gives me a half-hour slot on his calendar. But he spends an hour and 10 minutes with me discussing that book, helping me to structure that book. And later when I was writing it, he comes to the Tata Management Training Center, Pune, discusses how it was going, and eventually he agrees to write a foreword for that book. Now that is generosity as I see it, okay? And he's a director of the top company of the Tata Group. So now 12 years later, I am turning 60 years of age in 2022. And on my birthday, I get a call from Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Harish, I have thought about this book, which will explain the longevity of the Tatas, how Jamsetji's lessons have fueled the growth of the Tatas, and would you like to co-author it with me? And I was delighted when I received this call, because he's been my mentor on my writing, and to be able to co-author it with it, unique opportunity. So we spent 2 years thereafter discussing the framework for this book, the stories that should go into this book. Mr. Gopalakrishnan typically used to meet me after his tennis games in the Bombay Gymkhana, and we had some good discussions, and that's where the Suhasini, the book, came out of.
All right. And the book is certainly, we always laugh about the 5 this and the 5 that. They actually have 10 P's. Each of the chapters is named after a P. So there's philosophy, there's purpose, there's people, there's pioneering, there's progress, and then there is the postscript. I want to ask you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Mr. Bhat referred to this idea of the longevity of the Tata's groups. In America, you have this concept of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. In 3 generations, the person who started the business is at the same level as his great-grandson, because by then the business has run its course when it's a family-owned business in particular. So what's the secret sauce for the Tatas?
That is what we set out to discover in this, you see, because let me just turn the clock back a little. I don't know how many of you attended Venki's session yesterday on why we die. Anybody attended?
Aging.
Well, 4 or 5. He's a micro biologist, and he's got the Nobel Prize, and he was explaining why human beings die. And if I take out the mumbo jumbo from it, he left 2 messages for me. First, he said, have and practice good habits, exercise, diet, etc. Second, avoid bad habits, putting on weight, too much of cigarettes, whatever. And the third thing that he said is that if you keep doing good habits and these bad habits, the DNA will take you through. Bad luck cannot be predicted. And generation after generation, there will be a little improvement. And we all know this. He got a Nobel Prize. We also know it, but we won't get the Nobel Prize for it because we try to practice it and we don't succeed that much. I asked him the question also. I said, what happens if you apply this to companies? Do you really need long-lasting companies? Or is it all right to be shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve? And it is that sort of thinking that told us there is something out there which we must identify. And I like to describe it, since we've just listened to a microbial scientist yesterday, that these P's are like the DNA of Tata. Philosophy, purpose, persistence, perseverance, profits. And I wrote an essay. Between us, we wrote an essay on each of these. And then I said, yeah, essay padhne ke liye kaun, people don't like to hear good stories. Look, this house should be more crowded. But if you talk about Indian democracy or something more sexy, then there'll be lots of people.
Global conflict, I know.
Yeah.
Global conflict.
Global conflict, then there are more people. But good stories, there are not that many takers. So I said, let's illustrate this with examples. And what Harish and I did was to take an example from the early period, which may be in approximately Jamsetji Tata, Dorabji Tata, the middle period, which is approximately JRD Tata, and the later period, which is sort of Ratan Tata. Of course, we have not ascribed their particular names to it. We just called it early period. And the point we are trying to make is that it's not difficult for a corporation to have a good purpose. It's not difficult for a corporation to have a good attitude to profit. It's difficult for a corporation to maintain that for 156 years. That's tough. Next week is the 157th birth anniversary of Jamsetji Tata. And I'm going to Navsari because they're very keen in Navsari, his birthplace. His house has been maintained where he was born, just to mark the man that he gave birth to an enterprise which has kept a certain philosophy alive. And by the way, before I went to go to his birthplace, Harish has visited his death place in Germany, in Neuheim. And the mayor of Neuheim wanted to have a function to mark Jamsetji Tata. And so we're doing all. Tata has got some. In the old days when we were young, we say, Helen mein koi jadoo hai. There's some jadoo. You can't describe Helen's jadoo. Tata mein bhi koi jadoo hai.
Or as Iqbal would say, kuch to hai.
Kuch to hai.
Hasti mitti nahi hai. Mr. Bhat, the idea that 150 years the Tata has just maintained this kind of amazing aura and has always been good seems a bit hard to believe. The Tatas have had their challenges, and it's whether it is that sometimes they didn't move as quickly enough, sometimes they weren't attracting the best talent. According to you, were there periods where there was a doubt, since you've looked at this history, that the Tata lineage would continue?
Yes, there were many periods when there was a challenge and there was a doubt. But let me give you one such story just for you to understand. So the first large industrial enterprise that Jamsetji Tata built was Tata Steel. How many of you here have heard of Tata Steel, Jamshedpur? Many hands up, I can see that. Much more interest than microbiology. But having said that, you should know the story of what happened with Tata Steel. Tata Steel was the single large Tata company, and there was textiles, of course. And Tata Steel was founded in 1907. It expanded and was doing pretty well. But when the First World War came up, Suhasini, 1914 to 1919, the demand for steel collapsed across the world, particularly from places like Japan that Tata Steel was selling to. And there came a time in 1924 when Tata Steel did not have money to pay the wages of its workers. The chairman of the Tata Group at that time was Jamsetji Tata's eldest son, Dorabji Tata. Jamsetji had passed away. And he receives a telegram from Jamshedpur saying there are no wages to pay the workers. And it came to a situation where Tata Steel may have to be shut down and mothballed. That is where, the Tata Group could have virtually stopped existing at that time because Tata Steel was the major revenue generator. So what does Dorabji Tata do? Here is Tata Steel, which is a listed company. Tata Steel had its IPO in 1907, listed company. Tata Sons owned some part of the equity. Dorabji Tata, without blinking an eyelid, he and his wife, Lady Meherbai Tata, who is a story in her own right, they decide to pledge their entire wealth, entire personal wealth, which at that time was 1 crore of rupees, including the 6th largest diamond in the world, which is the Jubilee diamond, 245 carats of size.
Oh, wow.
245 carats, twice the size of the Kohinoor. They decide to pledge their entire personal wealth to raise a loan of 1 crore of rupees for Tata Steel from the Imperial Bank of India, State Bank of India, which is now the State Bank of India. And that is what led to Tata Steel's survival. And later Tata Steel came out of that post-World War scenario. It became much more prosperous. They got that money back. So here was an existential challenge for the group. And this is how the group faced it. The chairman of the group decided to pledge his entire personal wealth to save the company.
And what happened to the diamond?
The diamond. No, there's a nice story to the diamond. So of course, if Suhasini is asking me that question, I could expect a question on the diamond. So the Jubilee diamond is an interesting story, okay? It was mined in the Jagafontein mines of South Africa. Dorabji Tata bought it for his wife, Meherbai Tata. He got married to her in 1898, and he said, he was a wealthy man because Jamsetji Tata was a wealthy man also. And Dorabji said, I should buy my wife this diamond. And it was the largest diamond in the world at that time. It is today the 6th largest diamond in the world. So 245 carats in size. He bought it for Lady Meherbai Tata. It was put on a claw and on a platinum necklace, I am told. And it was so valuable that each time they took it out of the locker, they had to pay a premium to the insurance agency. That's how valuable it was. So it was pledged to the Imperial Bank of India, like I said. They got it back when Tata Steel became profitable and paid back the loan. And it came back to Dorabji Tata's family. In 1931, Lady Meherbai Tata, Dorabji's wife, passed away. 1932, Dorabji Tata passed away and left his entire wealth to a charitable trust, the Dorabji Tata Trust. So the diamond also passed on to the Dorabji Tata Trust. By 1938, 1939, the Dorabji Tata Trust decided to invest in India's and Asia's first cancer hospital, which is the Tata Memorial Hospital at Parel in Mumbai. And they needed money for that. So the Jubilee diamond was sold to Cartier to raise money, and that money went into the creation of the Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai. So I would call it the luckiest diamond in the world. You know,
what a great story.
I would call it the luckiest diamond in the world. It's a diamond which saved workers' jobs in Tata Steel and kept Tata Steel alive. And it's a diamond which led to the formation of India's and Asia's first cancer hospital. Can there be a luckier diamond than that? I do not know. I think many more Indians should know about the Jubilee diamond than about the Kohinoor.
Yeah, absolutely. The diamond that saved so many lives. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, if we were to go back these 150 years and more, what is it that an audience, and of course so many in this audience I can see know about the Tatas, but basically have dealt with JRD, R&T. What is it that people should really know about Jamsetji Tata's life?
About Jamsetji Tata's life?
Yes.
About him as
about
a person?
him as a person.
Well, you know, one of the key features of Jamsetji Tata was he didn't like to make public speeches, and didn't like to be seen in the newspaper. Good or bad, you decide. But on one rare occasion, when he had made a lot of money out of Empress Mills, there was the first textile mill he set up called Empress Mills for a variety of reasons that was enormously successful. And he decided to support the governor of Mumbai, a person called Lord Ray, who invited him to come and be present at the inauguration of whatever municipal program was being done. And Jamsetji opened his speech, which I found a very touching speech. He said, "Providence has given me far more wealth than I have deserved." And then it goes on to say other things. Now, how many business people will you find who will say that their wealth has come due to providence?
Not either inherited or hard work.
And the guy says, therefore, I have asked myself the question, if providence has given me this, is it really meant for me? And then I would like to give it to other people, because he said the purpose of a business is not to treat the community as a stakeholder, but its very reason for existence. I think that's a stunning idea. 1895 or whatever it is. And I think that is the reason why. But my admiration for Tata is not that he had this idea. Carnegie, Rockefeller, many people had such ideas. But that he has passed this lamp, as the Parsis would say, the lamp should never go out. Passed this lamp through 7 or 8 generations. And I hope many more in the future. And that is what I find very remarkable. He himself seems to have been a modest man. He is quite fond of food. His shape and size suggest that he's very fond of food. And in order to imagine how his life would have been, I walked from Esplanade House, which is opposite Bombay Gymkhana, for those of you who are familiar with Bombay, to Ripon Club near Kalagoda, and imagine what he was seeing and what he was discussing. He would come to Ripon Club and meet, which he helped to set up, by the way, and then he would discuss with people like Dadabhai Nauroji, Jamsetji Jiji Boy, who were all members of the Ripon Club. So I asked my Parsi friend to take me for a meal to the Ripon Club. And when they offered me mutton, keema, I said, I can't eat mutton. He said, "To su kare tumhe?" What sort of a guy are you who doesn't eat mutton? They gave me vegetarian dhansag, probably the first vegetarian dhansag ever made in Ripon Club. And then I walked across to the opposite, what was then the premier hotel of Bombay, Watson Hotel, where, I don't know, there's no proof of this, but the story goes that he was refused entry on the ground that he was not of the right color. And it is said that he said, "I will set up another hotel here, which will be the pride of every Indian." And that's how Taj Mahal Hotel came up in Apollo.
Now, apart from the person he was, there's also all the travels he did. I don't think people really recognize how he was a pioneer in India's relations with other countries in terms of business, where he wanted to set up business. And then there's that really interesting story. You know, earlier you had mentioned the 4 greats that Ram Guha spoke about, of his journey with Swami Vivekananda.
Yep. So I must mention an interesting sidelight. So Mr. Gopalakrishnan told me that he went to the Ripon Club and they served him mutton dhansak, and then he had vegetarian dhansak, which was prepared for the first time ever in the history of the club. So I said I should go there and have mutton dhansak, because I enjoy my mutton. And therefore, one of my senior colleagues in the Tata Group invited me there. It's still a Parsi club in the fort area of Mumbai, and wonderful mutton dhansak, but I don't want to speak about that now.
Fourth disclaimer, I'm partly Parsi.
Wonderful. Then I think we should go there, and the mutton dhansak is excellent.
Though.
Vegetarian, okay. With Mr. Gopalakrishnan then. But let me tell you about this voyage, okay? Of the 4, I think it was a fortuitous voyage. Swami Vivekananda had decided to speak at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. And he had to take a ship journey to go to Chicago. So he decided to go from India to Japan, and from Japan to the western coast of the Americas, and then take a train to Chicago. So Swami Vivekananda had reached Yokohama for this reason. And he had been persuaded by many people, including the Raja of Dindigal, to go to the Parliament of Religions and speak. At around the same time, Jamsetji Tata had visited Japan with a view to starting a shipping line in India, which incidentally, Suhasini, is one of his ventures which did not work out. But he had gone to Japan to meet NYK, the shipping line there, and speak to them. And then he wanted to go to Chicago as well, because there was the expo in Chicago in the year 1893 to, I think, mark 300 or 400 years of Christopher Columbus discovering America. So he wanted to go to Chicago as well, and both of them, by sheer accident, chose to go by a ship called the Empress of India to all the way to America. And this was an 18-day voyage from Yokohama to Vancouver in Canada. And all those 18 days, most of those 18 days, I'm told that they spent time talking to each other about their dreams for India. I can imagine what those conversations, because both of them were very intense people. Swami Vivekananda was organizing monks, and he wanted monks to become technically competent. Jamsetji Tata had big dreams for a steel plant in India, higher education in India, and so forth. And one of the things that came up during that entire voyage was Swami Vivekananda apparently encouraged Jamsetji Tata to consider manufacturing in India, to create jobs. It's an issue today, and it was an issue way back then. The second thing that they discussed was higher education for Indians. And out of the discussion came the idea of India's first science university, which Jamsetji Tata wanted to set up, which is the Indian Institute of Science at Bangalore, which continues to be India's top-ranked science university until today. The story doesn't end there. Picture abhi baki hai. So what happened after that was the ship voyage got over. Swami Vivekananda went and delivered his famous lecture at the Parliament of Religions, Sisters and Brothers of America, which you will know. Jamsetji Tata went to the expo in Chicago, understood technological developments, then went to find a person who could put up the steel plant in India. He went on a separate journey. But 4 years later, when Jamsetji Tata wanted to put up the Indian Institute of Science, he did not get support from the British government of that time. Lord Curzon was the Viceroy of India. Lord Curzon was very skeptical. He said, who will study in this institute? Who will teach at this institute? Do Indians deserve such an institute? There were many things that he put in the way. So Jamsetji Tata reached out to Swami Vivekananda and said, I need your help. And there's a letter still in our archives, beautifully written letter by hand from Jamsetji Tata to Swami Vivekananda, saying, please help me. This is a very important thing for India's development. We need scientists. We need a university of higher education.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you refer to the Hindu carrying the
yes,
letter.
Yes, that's right. And what happened, and Swami Vivekananda, in all fairness to Swami Vivekananda, he immediately responded. He was the editor of a magazine called Prabuddha Bharata at that time, which was the magazine that he was publishing. And within a few months, Swami Vivekananda published an appeal in the Prabuddha Bharata saying, there is no venture more worthwhile for India and Indians today than to have our country's first university of higher education in science. And he published that appeal. It went all over the country. I'm told it made big news. Jamsetji Tata pledged half his wealth to it. Most of it in buildings in Mumbai, so that the rental from those buildings could constitute income for the Indian Institute of Science forever rather than a one-time grant. And that's how the idea of Indian Institute of Science blossomed out. And then the Maharaja of Mysore gave land in Bangalore, and Indian Institute of Science has come up. Even today, I don't know how many of you here have visited Bangalore or IISc, but if you go to Bangalore and ask for Indian Institute of Science, a lot of auto rickshaw drivers will say, Elli sir, Elli hogbeko. But if you tell them, I want to go to the Tata Institute, they understand very well. We will take you there. So that's how it's still referred to.
That has actually happened to me. And what a great story of Swami Vivekananda saying that what's important is for the science and technology to be studied. And I have to say, contrast maybe today to heads of technical institutions who want to study traditional medicine instead.
Suhasini, since you appreciated the story, can I add a little addendum?
Please do.
Swami Vivekananda. Ram Guha thought he's one of the greatest guys. I certainly think so, irrespective of Ram Guha. He had a way of influencing people through obliquity. He would tell them something so gently that they didn't know its advice. but it will come back to them later on. And this is one such example. A second example, when he was the fiery monk in Saffron in Chicago, he had the top ballet dancer of the world, a French lady, who was his disciple. And she came to John D. Rockefeller, who was a good friend, the richest man in the world at that time, and said, "You must come and meet this Swamiji." He said, "What am I going to do with him?" Came. They had a conversation. That's all recorded by this French lady, by the way. I got it from the Vivekananda archives. And it seems that Swamiji told him, "I believe you're the richest man in the world." He said, "That's what they all say." He said, "How much richer than the average American are you?" He said, "I don't know, maybe 100 times. He said, "Do you think you're 100 times smarter than the average American?" He said, "I must be, otherwise why would I have the money?" He said, "Has it ever occurred to you that you're merely a conduit?" Look at this with what Jamsetji did in 1895. And of course, Rockefeller was not very happy with that comment. He went away. But it took 12 years. And John D. Rockefeller, upon his death, gave away all his money to the Rockefeller Foundation.
Right. And one of the big charities of the world. Another coincidence that you did not mention is the fact that Jamsetji Tata came from a priestly family. His father, Nasarwanji Tata, was actually the first in his family to move away from the priests and to take up trading. And then Jamsetji followed, set up Tata Sons and all the rest. What is interesting is the nature of the philanthropy of the Tatas as well. That it is about the IISC, it is about the Cancer Institute, it is about giving labor laws before anyone else. Maybe some of it comes from this lineage and background as well. But the really interesting part about how he set it out is, are there rules today as to where the Tatas can put their money? Yeah. What is the kind of philanthropy they want to follow? Yeah.
So, Suhasini, interesting question. Let me close out the Indian Institute of Science discussion for a moment. Probably the only university in the world which came about because of a collaboration between a religious monk and an industrialist. Can you imagine that? The Indian Institute of Science. We should feel very, very proud, and that collaborations of this kind happened so long in the past. Philanthropy in the Tata Group, I don't know how many of you are aware, but the Tata Group is not owned by a family. It is not owned by PE funds. It is not owned by any of those kind of shareholders.
And it's the largest trust in the world, I think.
Yes, the Tata Group is the holding company of the Tata Group, Tata Sons, which both Mr. Gopalakrishnan and I were part of for many years. 66% of that holding company is owned by the Tata charitable trusts. And this happened because Jamsetji Tata's sons donated their wealth to the Dorabji Tata Trust and the Ratanji Tata Trust. So in a sense, and the Tata Charitable Trusts have a mandate to contribute back to the nation. There are definite areas. Healthcare is one area. Education is one area. Education and digital literacy. The National Water Mission is one area. Art and culture is another area. So there are definite 7 or 8 areas which have been laid out. But because of this ownership pattern, what happens is that year after year, 66% of the profits achieved by the Tata Group through dividends, or to be technically correct, 66% of the dividends go back from Tata Sons to the Tata Charitable Trusts. And the Tata Charitable Trusts have then used this money to construct things like the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, the Tata Cancer Hospital. Even as we speak, there are 20 cancer hospitals coming up in the country through the Tata Trust.
I've already asked about the diamond. Can I ask exactly how much the Tata Trust runs?
Exactly how much the Tata Sons earns in a year depends on the profits the Tata Sons makes.
Controls.
Yeah,
lakhs of crores.
Yeah, it would. The Tata Trusts would control, I think, I mean, the amount they would have contributed to the country over the years would go into lakhs of crores. I don't have an exact amount, but Hurun, which is a global, they do a ranking of philanthropists across the world, and I remember seeing their ranking 2 years ago of the philanthropists who have contributed most, and this was a global ranking, not an India ranking, and in that ranking, the philanthropist anywhere in the world who has contributed the most through philanthropy over the past 100 years was Jamsetji Tata. Right up there. And this is something that as Indians we can be very proud of, because he is in fact the father of modern Indian industry. And I would actually call him, Suhasini, the original startup man of our country. Tata Steel was a startup, Tata
all
Power
of
was a
these have been
startup, and so forth.
startups in a certain sense. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, so you have this legacy of philanthropy, but some would say maybe that legacy is being diluted. Would Mr. Jamsetji Tata be okay with really where philanthropy goes today? After all, he was somebody who said that he would put into causes rather than say places of worship, as many people would say. A former chairperson who, of course, had a very bitter relationship with the Tatas, Mr. Mistry, questioned where the dividends were actually going. Do you think if Mr. Jamsetji Tata was there today, he would really be proud and happy with where the Tata Group is today?
When we wrote this book, we said there'll be somebody like Suhasini who will ask us this question. So chapter 9 in the book is an imaginary panel discussion at JLF.
It is, but continue.
And the 4 panelists are Jamsetji Tata, the founder, Ratan Tata, Dorab Tata, his successor,
Nauroji
Saklatwala, his successor, and J.R.D. Tata, his successor. So that is chairman of Tata's from 1868 to 1992. 130 years. And I would commend, if for no other reason, to read this chapter, that you buy the book. Because it is an imaginary panel discussion of them looking down from heaven and saying, what are our dikras doing down there? Are they keeping up our values? And what should we interfere in what they are doing? Please read it. If nothing else, I'll get the sale of one more book.
All right. But on the same question, the Tatas is known for the Tatas Administrative Service, built like almost the IAS or the IFS or anything. So you have people trained through this culture. But more and more, and you're not an exception either, there are lateral entrants, people coming in from other companies. Over these last few years, we've seen the Tatas looking abroad for investments. Jaguar was acquired, Tetley was acquired. So that kind of culture coming in as well. Do you worry about the culture of the Tatas being diluted from this essentially non-profit motive, family-oriented, very different kind of corporate?
Should I answer that?
Please, both of you.
Listen, you can't have a better archetype than a guy like me. Coming out of, I don't regard Hindustan Lever as a multinational. I regard it as India's most Indian multinational. It happens to have a foreign ownership, but Hindustan Lever is a wonderful company. But I came from an Anglo-Saxon type of thinking company. Sort out everything, get to the point, and attack. Whatever it is, marketing, production. When I came to Tata's, I found a very different kind of company. It was also an excellent company, but it was a very different kind of company. And I think the important thing for me was to adapt to that, which I tried. I survived 18 years and I happily retired, so I suppose I survived. At one stage, about 10 years after I got in, I made a list of the top 40 people in Tata's. And I found 20 of them have come from outside, mid or late career like me. Ravikant, Prasad Menon, Dr. Sumantran. I don't want to go through the whole list now. And they were very, very competent and great insiders like Ramadurai, Ishat Hussain, and so on and so forth, Muthuraman. So I went to Ratan Tata. I said, boss, do you think Tata has a problem of culture dilution? He said, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I showed him the list. I said, half the people come from outside. That includes me. He said, yeah, but we convert you quickly.
That's a nice one.
So when I joined Tata's, I was amazed. I was handed over creation of wealth by Lala. I was sent to Tata Management Training Center. I went to the Founders Day celebration in Jamshedpur. हमको तो पूरा ideologically I was made into a satsang, sarsang chalak.
Tata's man.
And you found there was value in it. It is not that you were being brainwashed. And then I became a convert. And this is a very, very interesting thing. You how to get outside ideas. And Jamshed Irani told me something which is wonderful. He said, Gopal, become an insider before you bring change. Don't be an outsider and try to make change.
Mr. Bhatt, I do want to bring my last question to you before we take a couple of questions from the audience.
Yep.
The flip side of this culture that is in danger of being diluted, even if it hasn't been so far, is the idea that the Tatas are seen as a clunky company, a company that's hard to change, that has a lot of, shibboleths, if you like, of the past and the culture and the way people work, and as I said, how many hours you work. Sudha Murthy herself, very popular at the JLF, has written to JRD Tata when she found that there was an advertisement in the paper for engineers, only gentlemen could apply. And she wrote to him and said, when the country was not independent, at that time your group started chemicals, locomotives, iron and steel industry. You're always ahead of your time. In this society, there are 50% men and women. If you don't give an opportunity to women, that you are cutting off the services of their services, that means your country will not progress. This long letter, which she put onto a postcard because she said that was what she could afford at the time. And of course, she did get the job and she was the first engineer, and the rest is history. But the idea, that's such a big idea that women should come into the engineering field, took its time. And my question really is the Tatas very difficult or very slow to change?
On the other hand, Suhasini, I think if any company in India has changed rapidly, it has been the Tatas. So I would argue against that thesis. And the reason I say this is as follows. We started our life as a textile company. Few years later, we built a steel plant. Few years later, we created India's first major hydroelectric project. I'm talking of the 1920s. By the 1930s, JRD Tata had created India's first airline, Tata Airlines, which became Air India. 1950s, the Tatas put up commercial vehicles, trucks, to take goods across India, because they say, without trucks, how can we move goods across this large country? By the 1960s, before computers and AI and everything had come up in the world, the Tatas established in 1968-69 Tata Consultancy Services, foreseeing that computers is what is going to be in. By the 1980s, they have established consumer products, Tata Tea, Tata Salt. By the 1990s, Westside, Zudio, Titan, Tanishq, India's first branded jewelry company by the 1990s. By the end of the 1990s, India's first indigenous car, the Tata Indica, is born from the Tata Group. First ever car made completely of Indian, components, designed in India. Come right into the present. The Tatas are taking a big leap into the future by investing in semiconductors and electronics, which is very important for the future of our country. So from being a textile mill in the 1880s, you are now IT services to semiconductors to consumer products to financial services company. Can you name for me, how many companies, for instance, would have made such a dramatic transition across industries decade after decade after decade? And I believe that that's what this book sets out to examine. And please permit me to say, I don't think the Tata Group is perfect. Okay, we have our flaws. We have our flaws. There are businesses which have not worked in the Tata Group. There are things which still need to be changed in the Tata Group. But overall, the transformation has been dramatic. And I think the Tata Group is much, of course, I'm not trying to sell the Tata Group to all of you. I have a bias towards the Tata Group, having worked there for 38 years.
I think you can see from the audience, they're so.
Yeah. But I can tell you this, that as long as this group stays focused on the reason why it was established, Jamsetji Tata's core reason for the community, earn profits from your companies, but use those profits to serve the community. As long as we remain focused on that, and as long as we continue to do what we have done over the past 150 years, doing business with integrity, I think the group will survive and flourish, and that is what this book sets out to explain. And I hope all of you, I would be a very bad author if I did not promote my book. So here is the book, and I hope many of you decide to read it. And some of these lessons are very useful for young people today.
All right, I do have time for one or two questions. So quickly, there's a lady in the front and there's a gentleman in the front. Let's get them both, and we'll get, yeah. There's that gentleman, and one of you can give a mic to the lady. and they can both ask their questions so that we can
Good
some time.
afternoon, panel. I'm Manasvi. I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree in science, and we just talked about IISc, which being a science student, being an Indian, I'm very, very proud of. It had all the big names, Jamsetji Tata, Swami Vivekanand, Vikram Sarabhai, and he also talked about, there's a chapter here in the book which had panel in heaven discussing all of this, what the kids are doing right now. So my question is, if Jamsetji Tata was alive today, what do you think would have been his approach towards India pushing artificial intelligence in India?
Okay, very interesting. And one question from the gentleman up front here, whom I believe, I'm not giving anything away if I say you were in...
Yeah, I'm Ricky Suri, and I've spent my entire life in Jamshedpur.
Yes.
Last 70 years. I have a couple of questions, and of course, it's not Jamsetji Tata, it might be better for the next session. But when Ratan Tata came on, the first thing he did was get rid of the three satraps, Modi, Kerkar, and Darwari Seth. And then after he handed over charge to Cyrus Mistry, he had to claw back and fire Cyrus Mistry. So what are your perspectives on the first firings and the later firing?
Thank you. You have two questions. One of you can take each, maybe.
So I will take the question about what Jamsetji Tata would do, and I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to answer the second one as well. So in both cases, I think let me answer the second one since it's a tougher one. I think Ratan Tata was very focused on the values of the Tata Group, and whatever he did at the beginning of his stint as chairman and towards after he had retired. In my view, he did it because he thought it was essential to protect the values, the coherence, and the unity of the Tata Group. I think the underlying reason was the same. And now I will take the first question, Suhasini. I would say that Jamsetji Tata was one of the pioneers in adopting technology. For the Empress mills, his textile mills, he used ring spindles in the mills when they were not even being used in England. It was considered too risky to use in England. That's how he made Empress Mills so profitable. So I would think he would embrace AI and be moving forward full speed with AI. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, any thoughts on that?
And last words.
I'm just imagining that Jamsetji Tata would say, "Su kevuch tame? Artificial intelligence, natural intelligence, nothing, yeah?" He would have readily embraced it, yes.
All right. It's on that note, I'm sorry, but I do have to say, okay, Tata. But a round of applause.
Suhasini,
really?
can I just mention the story which went behind it? So I should tell you, there are many stories why OK Tata are painted on the back of trucks. Okay, you will see them everywhere. But one interesting story, which I have not been able to verify so far, one interesting story is that at Tomco at one time, the Tata Oil Mills company had a soap called OK. Okay, and therefore, OK Tata was a good way of advertising that soap. This is no verification to the story. Mr. Gopalakrishnan and I are both marketers here, but this is something that someone has narrated to me. If they did that, it was a brilliant move because at zero cost, they got millions of trucks carrying the OK name across the country.
Much cleaner truck drivers. But thank you all. You've really been a great audience. Why don't you come and meet them now? Thank you.